Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Metaphysical Egypt. Alan Peoples again with Patricia Awion Lehman. This is episode 37 now.
Sekhmet roars. I think a lot of you knew this was coming if you've been following along with our other episodes. The last one was entitled Catastrophe. So, of course, Sekhmet has to roar. I'm going to start this off. I was just at the Cairo Egyptian Museum with a guest, and was a new display I hadn't seen before. And in the last episode, remember we were talking about the crocodile canoes?
Right.
And this was displayed. I think it didn't have a card or anything, but it was in a section with other Neolithic artifacts. And it's a canoe shaped like a crocodile. Now it's small, but of course it's symbolic. It's almost exactly what the Mayans talk about in the Popol Vuh. And again, just as a reminder, this crocodile canoe, basically is considered the rebirth of the maize god, which is what Osiris is as well. He's the corn god, the maize god, the barley, agriculture. He's us, he's the land, and he's the earth itself. And in the world that we're living in, he is, anything that grows, basically. And we even see, the corn and the maize growing out of his body. But here it says these roads are sometimes imagined as canoe routes about 3 hours after midnight. Linda Shaleli identifies the visible portion of the Milky Way with the cosmic canoe. And illustrated in classic Mayan art, it conveys the maize god through the underworld to the place where he will be resurrected. And we're going to talk a little about this in that episode. And this place is the hearth of creation in Orion. And of course, Orion is Osiris. So, different parts of the world, different time periods. The Mayan came later. So obviously there was, either a migration of information through time or a migration of information through space, or just a knowing with the same idea. And here the sky of the new era will be raised. Later, as the Milky Way begins to turn upright again, the canoe appears to sink. Rising and sinking, it's the same story in both, in all over the world. And again, just a reminder, this is Osiris. On the far right, you can see him at the bottom, and he's being carried by the crocodile, which represents digestion. And above that is creation, digestion, both going two different directions. And the crocodile, dragon, serpent, different, it emerges in different ways in different mythologies. But it's probably Draco, and it has to do with what time is it? Where is the pole star? What state of consciousness are we in? And here it says the crocodile canoe is often equated with an aspect of Horus. And of course, Horus is the ascended Osiris. So, the two different aspects.
Right. It's a digestion of form from Osiris into Horus.
Exactly.
From form into formless.
Exactly. And from formless back into form again. And
right.
This is the journey of perception that we're on. And we're about to get into some pretty scary, what will appear to be very scary things. And I wanted to remind you, this is from Rumi, that this place is but a dream, and only a sleeper considers it real. Then death comes like dawn, and you wake up laughing at what you thought was your grief. There is no death. So why did we descend into physical form? And this comes from a story by Story Waters. And it's actually a book, The Messenger, Imagine No Religion, Consciousness Creates Reality. And we've been talking about that. And here it says the divide between wider consciousness and its embodiments is the primary separation from which all experiences of duality emerge. Just as we cannot remember spirit without becoming spirit, so spirit cannot fully remember what mortality is like without becoming mortal. They differ in that spirit can better observe the opposing experience. However, to observe the human experiences is not to have the human experience, just as to read an autobiography is not to have lived the life it describes. But just as reading books is its own unique experience of imaginative pleasure, so do many forms of consciousness exist to observe the human experience and be changed by it. Their perspective on us is unique and involves them uniquely. Life on earth creates life at other levels of reality or consciousness in ways beyond our comprehension. And so we don't, again, pointing out, yes, we live in form and formless realities, but there's many different levels of how we exist in all of these realities. And that sounds a little mind-blowing, and it is. But again, what he's saying here is we can't imagine because we are locked in this space, form continuum. We're in this physical form that through the veil of forgetfulness. But once we're free from the veil, and this is about what we're about to talk about as we move forward, then everything becomes clear. So it's not necessarily an experience to be afraid of. And I was reading, and I found this in my research, and I found it just so cool because it's showing. Well, let me say, what it's saying. As it's describing the figures, and it says, as seen in his drawing, Neoplatonist Marcello Ficino or Ficino. You know me, I'm really bad with words and names. Presented the sun as the embodiment of the descending divine's light, spiritual enlightenment, and physical warmth directed toward below, the symbolism of the blazing sword, St. Michael and his sword, right? Mm-hmm. This image is taken from Cloud Upon the Sanctuary. So in other words, in the spiritual world, there are only two properties. The attribute of receiving the light, the soul, spiritual vessels, the shield. Think of symbolism now. And the attribute of giving light, the spirit and the sword. This alchemical doctrine is incorporated within Christian, Islamic, and Jewish mysticism and represents an integral part of each. We should not forget that the term hermetically sealed comes from the tradition of Hermeticism. And this goes back to Thoth or Jehuti in Egypt. Mm-hmm. That's the Greek Hermeticism, but which assumes that the vessel is able to seal things so that the purity of the content is preserved in the best possible way. Well, we're in that vessel, and right now it's hermetically sealed until we escape. But I love, and I like to point these things out as we go, because you're learning about symbolism itself. And I know a lot of our audience likes to travel and go to ancient sites, and and all over the world, this symbolism is very similar. And the swords, look how the sword is angled. Look how, where it's pointing is usually giving you direction. And here, this image of the sword and the stone is clearly at a 23.5 degree angle. And it's the spirit locked in stone, of course, that King Hathor pulls, the spirit or the truth, or, that's locked in stone, he pulls it out. He's Horus. So, everything we were just talking about. And of course, the other image on the far left is showing the spirit as light descending into form. So, just again, fascinating symbolism. If you learn the symbolism, you'll be the experts traveling the world, discerning what they were trying to tell us. And so Sekhmet, we talk about, I almost entitled this The 3 Days of Darkness, but this is the pause. And again, we've talked about this in many episodes, that we have this rising and falling, and in between each we have the pauses, the moments of silence. And this is one of the things Sekhmet represents. When Sekhmet roars, she goes crazy. And again, I can repeat the story of Sekhmet. I'll do it quickly. Mm-hmm. But she is like, Ra basically looks down on earth. Ra, the sun, the great sun, however you want to view this, looks down, and he sees that we're not revering the gods. right? The forces of nature. And this is where we're at today. We are destroying, we hear about it all the time, how our technologies are destroying the earth. Our technologies with food are hurting our bodies. We're getting sick. The earth and its inhabitants are in a state of disease. And so he looks down, he gets angry, and he takes his eye, which is Hathor, the nurturing rays of the sun. And as he takes that eye um, from his head, the eye of Ra, and he throws it back in anger, it becomes Sekhmet, the fierce rays of the sun. And basically, she's relating to, the experiences we have with the solar flares. We're going to talk about micronova, super flares, all these things that disrupt, the excess radiation makes for many earth changes, including volcanoes and earthquakes, and we call them cataclysmic events, right? Got to point that out. Everything's connected and related in our
Well,
words.
like you said a few minutes ago, these symbols are everywhere. They're in our language.
They're in
They're
our language. Yes. Keep going.
Sorry, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
No, anytime. They're the root of our existence and emerge from into our language, the language of light.
Well,
Um,
Sechem is power. Sechem et is female power. So it's basically,
the pulse of the life force.
hmm,
It's 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 currency, either nurturing or biting, as we know the feminine can be. Yeah, it's completely natural. It's nature. They are forces of nature. And so we're going to talk today. We talked a little bit about the galactic sheet that comes from the center of the galaxy like a giant magnetic wave. Well, here's the waveform of the currency we're talking about. We're going to talk about Ben Davidson today as well. And he's someone I found when I started to see all these things at the sites, when I started to see the cycles and how integral what's happening with the sun is to the cycles of consciousness that we experience on Earth. And as I started researching and using search engines, I discovered the work of Ben Davidson. And he is another researcher, astrophysicist. He has studied. He studies the science, the white papers, and he brings forth so many of the same ideas that we're going to be talking about. So I am going to highlight a lot of his work throughout this particular episode. I'm not saying he's 100% right. I'm certainly not saying I'm totally right. I'm bringing forth ideas that seem to be agreed upon throughout, everywhere. And they're coming from both spirituality and from science. They're coming from our intuition. They're coming, we're all beginning to feel something big is happening. So I'm just giving you something else you can look into and research, and even look at within your lives as to the energies that are happening now. But in the last episode, we did talk about plasma as being conscious, and this galactic field sheet is plasma, and it's filled with magnetic dust. And again, that magnetism that sparks changes, that's Sekhmet. And it sparks changes throughout our entire solar system. All of our planets, everything in our solar system is being affected by events that are happening now. I love this image in the white square to the far left. Not quite Sekhmet, the other side, but you see this image. It's Geb, and it looks like he's seeding the serpent, and the serpent is seeding Geb. And that's the form and the formless realities. And it's just phenomenal. Geb is often shown with, like he's a duck,
right.
and I think it has to do with sound and that, the quacking of the mother duck, the quacking of all ducks, it's, or goose, the duck, that same idea. When you hear that sound, it's like, whoo, and it's the cosmic egg. So it's all related. But it's this, one side seeds the other. And we've been trying to show you this again throughout this series, and what this all means. Again, there is no death. So Sekhmet is the fierce rays of the sun. Um, and this is a quote relating to her: "May those who are in darkness be afraid of you." um, yeah, because she comes. She's the one who opens her chest to show her heart and, wreak fury. Now, when we continue the story of Sekhmet, he throws her down. She scourges the earth. And she's bloodthirsty with rage. And she literally, is just destroying everything in her wake, including humanity. And Ra gets upset, and he's afraid that she's going to destroy Earth itself. And so he turns the waters, the Nile, the Red Sea, into wine. And she thinks it's blood, and she just can't get enough. And of course, she becomes drunk. And almost drunk with fury, right? She becomes drunk and passes out. And there's your 3 moments of silence, the silent sun. Everything stops spinning. She's the initiate of these moments. There's a wonderful quote we got from Hakim, and it's Sekhem Sesh Gir Set. And it translates as, when Sekhmet speaks, rages, and roars, Set shuts up. And that's why we talk about the moments of silence. This is the same idea as, killing the serpent or Draco. We're stopping, as Set itself, we're stopping the chaos.
Wow.
So yeah, isn't that amazing? Sekhem Sesh Gir Set. She stops the chaos by revealing her heart in all its wonderful aspects. This is the Divine Mother in her healing aspect, because she opens the space for the healing of the planet. It's not the end of the world, it's the beginning of the new world. This is at Abydos, and it's beautiful. You actually see Ramses, you actually see Seti the First. He's on the far right. And in front of him is his son, Ramses II. Yeah, the quite famous Ramses II. And they're lassoing the bull in front of Wepawat. And Wepawat, of course, is one of the path openers. And he's the path opener for the new expression. So they're stopping the bull. We are the bulls, right? We fell into form in the age of Taurus. So we have to lasso the bull. And then you can see them, Seti the First pulling the henu bark on a sled. I'll show you a picture of it in a second. But the first time I went to Abydos, or the second time I went with Yosef, and we were walking through this corridor, and the guy that was with us said, "Oh yes, this is the capturing of the alien." And I knew too much, even at this point. It's like, I don't think that's what we're looking at. And I learned later from one of the senior keepers at the site, who literally, it was my next visit, and I said, okay, the other guy told me this was the alien. Who was this really? And he said, Sokar. Mm-hmm. So I did my homework. And
that image we've seen so many times before.
Exactly. And it's in so many of the temples, this image. And the key now, I realized that whenever you see anything pulled on a sled or sledge in Egypt, it represents a moment of silence. So this is Sokar. It's Osiris in his 3 moments of silence. We even had this with the resurrection of Jesus Christ, right? He's in the cave for 3 days. And then he's resurrected. Well, the same thing with, in a way, but the same thing happens with Osiris. We have the raising of the dead and the 3 days of silence. It represents the solstice, the winter solstice, the summer solstice, the 3 days when the days don't get longer or shorter. And it basically means silent sun, solstice, but it's also the 3 moments in our great year, at the height and nadir of our great year, when we have 3 moments of silence and the earth stops spinning. Or, I'm speaking in metaphor. This is a journey of perception. So we have the perception that everything stops spinning for a moment of silence. So here we have 2 images again, all both relating to the same thing. On the far right is what we've just looked at. You can even see it sort of looks like he's got another little bird. It's like the kangaroo pouch, another little bird popping its head out. That's Horus. Mm-hmm. He's about, to give birth to the ascended Osiris, right? So Sokar is this transformation from Osiris to Sokar to Horus. This is what we're looking at. And then to the far right, you see the bird, the hawk, the bird. It doesn't matter, because the whole story here is about that moment of silence when, the bird is sent out. It's even the same story as the bird alights on the papyrus pillar or the reed as the mound emerges after the floodwaters recede. And there you can see that the bird is on the reed, the upright pillar, in a moment of silence before the next breath.
And the mound emerging is Sokar, is Mount Meru.
Well, it is. And it's also Ptah. So Ptah is the mound that emerges from out of the blue.
Out of the blue.
Out of the blue waters, right? Of consciousness. So again, remember to think of this in metaphor. We can take root chakra understanding, but as we raise our levels of consciousness and remember that this is a journey of perception, then we can begin to speak in metaphor with the words we use in a 3D. Yeah, I know it sounds really, complicated, but it's really simple. So the mound emerges. So after the silence, we rise. Within this unchanging nothingness, there was the potential for creation. The Egyptians believed that from these 8 gods, and I'm talking about the Agdod, the creator of Neters, or forces of nature, these 8 gods came a cosmic egg that contained the deity, the god, the force of nature, responsible for creating the rest of the world, including the primeval mound, the first land to arise out of the waters of pre-creation. In some versions of the myth, the egg was laid by a goose named the Great Cackler, while in the other versions, an ibis, the bird associated with Thoth, is responsible for the egg. Thoth's appearance here is probably the work of a Hermopolitan priesthood who wanted to recognize the importance of the city's patron deity. After the mound appeared, a lotus blossom bloomed, signaling the birth of the newborn sun god. So see, I pulled together all the symbols I just showed you in the last couple slides. And here is where, we point out the whole Venus-Earth connection, that, this possibility that after the 3 days, after the 3 moments of silence, and the earth comes, the earth stops spinning, will it spin the other direction? And I put forward that, metaphorically, it has to be this way. It can't be any other way. We have to experience both sides of ourselves, our duality within. And again, we can speak in metaphors. The whole concept is we do reverse our polarities. And in that reversal of polarity, we have the perception that the earth is spinning the opposite direction and the sun rises in the west. And there's many ways to look at that. But this is another quote from Will the World Come to an End? And it says, the Mayans predict the diminishing of the Earth's magnetic force affecting the duration of days and nights, and the Earth would stop for 3 days and restart its rotation in the opposite direction. So again, this is from the Mayans, and there, again, so many myths worldwide. And I know I sound like I'm repeating myself, but I'm trying to pull it all together connect all the dots of all the things we talked about as we proceed with our discussion today. Here's another netter. She's beautiful. We see so many feminine netters depicted as the serpent, the waveform, with its peaks and valleys and moments of silence. And Merit Sager is known as she who loves silence, and the lady of the peak. And it's just beautifully. The feminine is the current, always. And the story that begins with the moment of silence, here it is, and it's a pen and ink of what is found on the walls at Den. It's a scene from the festival of Sokar, who we were just talking about, at Darrow, Medina. So you can see Sokar on the bark, the crocodile canoe, whatever you want to call it. It's the silent sun in that moment being pulled on a sled. Is it another form of the Ark of the Covenant? I'm sure it is. And in front of that, in the middle, we see Horus on the lotus or papyrus pillar, that which emerges. And you can see clearly that it's representing our own Kundalini rising. Everything happening without happens within, as above, so below. It's a fractal, holographic perception of reality. And that's why once you find the patterns, you know how it all comes together, and it can't be any other way. And there we see the seeding of the new sun with the god Min, and in front of him is the path opener, and he's offering the new sun. It's basically bringing it back to life. So everything in one beautiful image. And it's a journey of perception, as I keep saying. This is a wonderful image again, and you see the sun and the moon. And above, at the very top in the center, is Taurus the bull. And before that is Gemini, and after that, of course, would be the ram of Aries. And it's basically showing us the descent into hell, which is the body, the dark night of the soul in the age of Taurus.
Falling into form.
Right, exactly, which is, the Kundalini goes down the spine. And then, of course, from the bottom, we spring into summer, heaven in the age of Scorpio. So from the primordial sea of free expression into our imprisonment into form in the age of Taurus, and then again from the lake of fire and digestion of form into freedom within the primordial waters of Scorpio. There's the fire at the bottom, and there's the lake of fire as displayed in the symbolism of Egypt. It's all there. And the two waters that we've talked about so many times, and the two directions of the serpent spinning up our spine into the freedom through the portal that's in our pineal, and then out through the head chakra. So it's a journey, and the sun and the moon, and as we talked about, Leo and Cancer as those places that represent silver and gold. It's alchemy, it's, alchemet. It all comes from Kemet. Hakeem used to say that all the time with a little glint in his eye and a smile, silly grin. It all came from Egypt. And I will say I don't hold to that. I'm sure it just came to everybody worldwide, but you can find everything in ancient Kemet in some way or another. So again, I showed this image to you before. If you've watched the other episodes, wonderful image of the two waters, the water, containment, consciousness contained, and consciousness, from the outside, consciousness from outside of the container. And this is, it's so interesting when you think about it, because when we descend into form, we have the ability to act and create. We can make things. That's creation. We create. We're co-creators. We talked about this in the last episode. Everything is conscious, and we are consciously creating. But we don't get to do that when we're on totally spirit, when we're formless, or when we're in the sea of primordial consciousness, that the ancient cultures speak about how it's sort of like you're in the state of complete gnosis. You know everything, but you can't taste, you can't feel, you don't have all those senses. You just know. So if that helps you understand why you would move from one to the other and back again.
Otherwise, you would never experience anything.
Exactly. Exactly. Of course, we want to experience. How can you imagine having all this incredible knowledge and this wonderful feeling of bliss, is how it's described, but not being able to experience it? So it could be, they say we all line up to be here now. And then we all get upset and say, oh, please, this is going to be my last life. And I always laugh when I hear people say that. Because, it's a reminder that we're not appreciating. And appreciation is such an important part of what we're learning in this experience. So
maybe if you say that this is definitely my last life, then it definitely won't be.
Karma's a bitch. I don't know, but they do tell us to be careful with our words.
Hmm.
You
get what you wish for, whether you realize it or not.
I've noticed that in my own life. I need to be very clear with what I imagine or intend, because I do see it happening in my life. And there's times I regret that I didn't, wasn't a little bit more particular with the way I envisioned it. But we are co-creating at all times. And, when they tell us to be here now, to be conscious, to be aware, I think it makes so much sense. And we tend to just go through the motions, our rituals. And maybe we need to stop doing the rituals and start living in the now with clarity.
And without fear.
Exactly.
Is the big point.
Huge point. We've had episodes all about that. So yeah, thank you, Allan. That is pivotal to to co-creating, because if we're doing it out of fear, that will emerge in some way in what we're creating.
Right. A long time ago, we talked about Kamumbo and navigating the crocodile pits in Kamumbo to overcome your fears.
Yes. Hugely, hugely significant. And that again is, diving deep into the darkness. And when you do it without fear, you'll always make all the right choices. But when we're in fear, our choices are slanted, and we can get ourselves into a lot of trouble. And it seems today that we are being driven by fear in almost every aspect of our lives. And just think about current events. Think about, the 2020 pandemic. Think of all the things that humanity did out of fear, and some of the repercussions. So, yeah, no, we need to be cognizant, and conscious, and we need each one of us to ask the questions that are pivotal in our lives, and receive the answers as they're given. So yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was great. So yeah, from open-minded approach on social media, this is great. So what we call today consciousness was better understood in the ancient wisdom and esoteric teachings. That's what we're telling you, folks. Anyway, the ancient Egyptians divided the soul into 9 parts, which are very similar to the 10 manifestations or Sephirot of Ein Sof in the Kabbalah, and the 7 chakras. The last emanation or manifestation in all 3 concepts, Ket in Egypt, Malkut in Kabbalah, and Muladhara chakra in Hinduism, is physical existence or the materialistic world. Because we are spiritually deprived, we are only aware of this reality, which is less than 5% of what's possible. That's incredible. That's how limited we are when we fall into form. Remote
Right.
viewing. Go ahead.
We talked about this in the very first episode, all about perception. We only can see the light spectrum, which is a tiny fraction of what's actually there.
Upside down and backwards, no less.
So
Yeah, exactly.
think about that in fractal terms.
Yep.
What are we constantly surrounded by? The 95% that we can't perceive with our five senses.
Well, exactly. We're only using a fraction of our DNA.
What are your cats hissing at when they're looking at the wall?
Or looking above your head, or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, I'm always wondering what they're thinking. So yeah, remote viewing works because we are made in the image of God. We all have those manifestations, spirits, parts of the soul, higher dimensions within us, but we have lost the ability to access them. Hence, we are spiritually blinded. Some have lost access to higher realms or trapped in the materialistic illusion, embracing technology that it only slightly mimics what you can do if you access the higher dimensions within. And we're going to talk about this a lot when we talk about the pyramids and all the megalithic structures that the ancients were capable of building that oftentimes we couldn't recreate today, not to mention the perfection in the sculptures that in 3 dimensions, it's something we can't do in 2 dimensions today. We have the ability, we've done it. So it's if we were to remember that we've done it, it changes the game. It changes everything. And as I've said so many times, if we just remember we are not our bodies, when things start to get chaotic, it changes everything. And this goes again hand in hand with what you just said, Alan, no fear. All ancient religions are connected to assessing these realms, from ancient Egyptian, Hinduism, Buddhism, the Mesoamericans, Aboriginal, Native Americans, and this is hidden in plain sight in the new religions where the symbolism is interpreted wrongly on purpose. So, just going to leave it there, folks.
Yeah, that's the signature of the Hanut.
Exactly. We're going to do an episode on the Hanut. I know I keep promising, but it is coming. I saw this and it just sort of describes what we were just talking about. My big, complex, multidimensional thought. Right? I have dreams that resemble that thought. Incredible things that I wake up and can't put into words.
Yeah.
And this is the whole idea that we are so limited in what we are capable of creating today because we forgot how powerful we are.
It's so interesting. Words are so limiting, but symbols are not.
Exactly. Linear language is, again, we talked about Arrival, and we'll have to do an episode on the movie Arrival. We have so much yet to do. But yes, linearity, linear language is a weapon that's used. And we need to remember how to go back to living in the now and staying in the nonlinear moment. So I love this. I just wanted to show, when I see these images from Peru, it's just describes so much everything we were talking about. We have the feline, we have the serpent, and we have the condor here. But it's, the serpent, the puma, and the condor, but it's all the same things we've been talking about. And these are the archetypal energies from Peru. Basically, these three sacred realms in Peruvian shamanism are illustrated by these statues, the curving serpent representing the lower, inner, or deep world, referred to by some as the Unhu Pacha, the puma representing this present world of the here and now, or the Kapacha, and the winged condor representing the upper, higher, or superior world, the Henek Pacha. The serpent represents infinity for the Incas. Yeah. This is kind of interesting. Hani Darwish, who is an Egyptologist here in Egypt, also working as a tour guide. Very interesting gentleman. And he just posted this on social media, and I found it fascinating. It's from the Berlin Papyrus of 3020. It's numbered 3024. And it's called The Debate Between Man and His Ba, Man and His Spirit. And he says here there is a heretic text written on the papyrus, this papyrus, which is displayed in the Berlin Museum in Germany. It is dated to the era of the Middle Kingdom. So we're talking early dynastic times. This text is around 11th, 12th dynasty. This text is a dialogue between a person and his soul. He was fed up with the situation, so he decided to break up with it. Anybody felt that way? In the middle of his speech, he said important words about who built the pyramids and who moved the solid granite stones, and the extent of the skill of the builders and his sorrow for them in their days. This text is known as the Desperate of Life Papyrus. Goes on to say, you will not be able to rise to the sky and see the sunlight, even if you are one of those who built with granite stone and built the wonderful pyramids with their superior skill. For this reason, the builders became sacred, but now their paintings have been destroyed, and they have become like those who died on the riverbank because there were no rescuers. After the flood swallowed part of them, and the sun destroyed them.
Huh.
So, yeah, again, it's everything we just were talking about. But isn't that fascinating? That, it's the whole thing. I did look more into it because there are many different translations always, and so many translations of the old texts. You can go to 20 different people who translated them and get 20 different stories.
Mm-hmm.
So it is kind of difficult. Nobody truly knows hieroglyphic. Nobody can speak or read and write hieroglyphics. We are still studying them, and all their many levels of meaning. But I just loved what this actually said, and it does refer, and we do know at Abydos and other temples, many other temples in places all over the world, they worship the ancestors. And when I say worship, it's a reverence. And I think it's because they understood that they had this superior perception or awareness or ability to master the forces of nature that has somehow been lost through the ages. And I think this particular man is basically lamenting, for those times gone by, that he doesn't have that, and life is a bitch right now, and he's not so sure he wants to go on. This is another translation, and it says, those who built in granite, who erected halls and excellent tombs of excellent construction, when the builders have become gods. And we talked about that. The early builders were demigods, the followers of Horus. Before we kept, right before we, or as we started to descend into lower levels of conscious perception. But their offering stones are desolate now, like those who died on the riverbank for lack of a survivor. The flood takes its toll, the sun also. The fishes at the water's edge talk to them. Listen to me. It's good for people to listen. Follow the feast day. Forget worry. All the things we were just saying. So a little bit different, but you can see it's similar. So let's move on. This comes from Rory Duff, and we've talked about him before. He's an expert on earth currents who resides in the UK. And he writes, Tesla once said that nature gives us both action and reaction, the good with the not so good. And what this now means is that nature also provides us with a wonderful opportunity. Cosmic energy is known to be evolutionary, and it is here. We can see how the cyclic galactic current sheet can lead to evolutionary cycles. Remember, this is plasma, conscious, electromagnetic, pulsing plasma consciousness. And Rudolf Steiner identified these cycles and, 100 years ago wrote that we were close to moving from the fifth epoch to the sixth epoch. And I think that moment is approaching even faster now. There's no avoiding it now. So yeah, this is galactic consciousness expanding and contracting. And basically, we know that our galaxy is this big spiraling waveform that emerges from center. And this breath of life comes from that center, and he breathes out and it breathes back in again. Is it a black hole or is it an eye of pure light? So many debates happening today, that there's no such thing as a black hole. Um, it doesn't matter the labels we try and contain it with. I believe it's our center in our galaxy, and there's a center in our universe. There's a center within ourselves. These are the centers from which we're all longing to go home again, and they're happening in cycles within cycles within cycles. Is it gravity or is it attraction to center? Of course, we want to go back to our heart for those moments of complete gnosis. And then we recreate again. This is from Mitch Batros from the Science of Cycles, News and Research. And he says, my studies identify a pattern of a weakening magnetic field, an influx of highly charged particles sets up the perfect conditions to produce a magnetic excursion followed by a magnetic reversal. And I'm just pointing out here that so many researchers are saying the same thing. The veil of Isis is thinning. This is our magnetic field. On March 5th, 2018, cosmic rays, this particular report comes from March 5th, 2018, saying cosmic rays are bad and they're getting worse. Now, 2018 was just 6 years ago. Keep that in mind. That's the conclusion of a new paper published by the research journal Space Weather. The authors, led by Professor we don't need to know the names, show that radiation from deep space is dangerous and intensifying faster than previously expected. Galactic cosmic rays come from outside the solar system. They are a mixture of high-energy photons and subatomic particles accelerated toward Earth by supernova explosions and other violent events in the cosmos. Our first line of defense is the sun. The sun's magnetic field and solar wind combine to create a porous shield that fends off cosmic rays attempting to enter the solar system. The shielding action of the sun is strongest during the solar maximum and weakest during the solar minimum. Hence the 11-year rhythm of the mission duration plot above. What you see on the right is the Earth's weakening shield, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But a lot of things are happening right now, and it's, in my opinion, incredibly significant. We need to be aware of what's happening because this isn't being widely told to the public. The general public is not aware of some of the things we're about to discuss. And I only said it's not important to know the authors now. If you want to research this, that this is up on YouTube. You can come back and get the names of some of these people. I think it's important to do your own research. And this is from the European Space Agency from 10 years ago, and it was called the Swarm 10th Anniversary and Science Conference. And they said back then, today there are concerns that the force that protects our planet is weakening and may even be on the verge of reversing polarity. Over the last 150 years, the magnetic field has lost about 15% of its strength. Now, today we say 160 years. For example, the South Atlantic anomaly is an area where the magnetic field is particularly weak. In fact, it's only half as strong as in Europe. This is problematic for satellites orbiting Earth, and the majority of technical faults occur when they pass through this region. So we have several different places on the Earth that experience, magnetic anomalies. But the South Atlantic anomalies closed off the coast of Brazil, and it is It is a problematic area. Again, if you do your research, there's so many things that are just incredibly bizarre, and we hear about them, but we need to start connecting the dots and why some of the events we're hearing about are happening. So again, from a journal published on July 8th, 2014, which is 10 years ago, it says the Earth's magnetic field is weakening 10 times faster now. Well, that's changing. That's changing exponentially. It's so much faster, it's insane. So here's Ben Davidson's chart, and everybody is saying the same thing. This isn't just Ben. So you can actually see what's happening from 1800 to 2050. This is the projection. We're at that big blue dot, 2023. And you can see that from you can see it start to drift faster and faster, and now it's about to descend so fast. What does this mean? I mean, that to me is just unbelievable.
That first dot on the line is the Carrington event, right? Around 1860 something.
1859, exactly. That, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So that, yeah, exactly, 1859. Here we are at the blue dot at 2023, and we're significantly lower. We're at about 25 to 30% weaker than we were 160 years ago. Think about that. That's almost a third, or more than a third, because they're not sure. We don't get the reports every moment, but a third of our magnetic field gone. Weakened to that extent means we are getting bombarded by radiation from the galaxy and the solar wind and the solar flares. So when these flares are happening, we're experiencing them more violently than we were in the past, just 10 years ago, and 160 years ago, drastically differently. So how is that affecting us? Well, we're going to talk about that. Ben actually says we're at the inflection point where things start to really accelerate. So we're there now. Okay, that was 2023. We're in 2024 now. So we're really drifting down quickly, very quickly. So that's why Allan and I are here to say take notice, because this affects us on all levels, body, mind, and spirit. Not to mention what's happening with the Earth and every other planet in the solar system.
Right, it's changing our perception of reality.
And what it's doing to consciousness. Because again, that veil is the veil of forgetfulness. Well, why do we feel like we're waking up? Why am I talking about this? Why are other researchers in the world suddenly understanding symbolism and mythology, when for years, we scratched our heads and we got, somewhere, and the real adepts got it. But it just seems like so many more people are waking up, because I think it was all placed here for this moment in time. And everything that we've been feeling, that this is that great moment, which I used to think many years ago that, right, they're just saying that, it's like, it's another end of the world date. But I think, like Barbara Hand Clow wrote in Catastrophobia, it's in our DNA. We have memories in our DNA, in our cells. Our water is conscious. We remember these cycles and these patterns, and we know that we're literally in the, one of those pivotal moments, and we're approaching it so fast. And we can prepare in many different ways. And these are the things that Allan and I will talk about, because a lot of people go immediately in body, I got to dig a bunker, and we're going to say, oh, maybe we can walk through this by remembering we're not our bodies. So let's keep going. Now, Ben says, and if you want to look him up, he's on Suspicious Observers. He's getting what he calls crustier with time. When I was first introduced to him, he was, he's just so serious about his research. But after years of being called a fake, or, fraud, or he doesn't know what he's talking about, or by the authorities. Now he has a lot of scientists that are supporting him, but there's obviously a lot in this world that we live in today. This is the dynamic, no matter what field you're in, whether it's medicine, biology, obviously in physics, and even in the work that I do. People are at each other's throats saying, no, I'm right. No, you're right. No, it's always I'm right. But you know what I'm saying? This is the moment we're in. So over time, you may notice that he gets a little sarcastic or angry. I see this happening everywhere. And he talks about people getting angrier. So, try and forget about that, and latch on to the knowledge, the knowing that he's projecting. And I'm not saying what he's preaching or saying, I don't even like the word preaching, talking about is absolute truth. I do think we all need to be discerning. Be discerning with everything that we're talking about here. Be discerning with everything you read and everything you see, especially everything you see on TV. We have to choose what channels we listen to. Be discerning with that. I'm not here to tell you who's right and wrong. I'm just offering you avenues for my, the journey of research that I've been on. There's so many places to look for knowledge. But this, to go on, because we want to talk about some of the effects and some of the things happening right now that point to what we're talking about. So we really are right, guys. No. Neutron radiation detected on commercial airplane flights. This is interesting. You want to experience space weather? Just step on board an airplane. And guys, I have had this effect. I have had some pretty nasty effects depending on where my flight goes on specific days. But flying above 30,000 feet can expose passengers to potentially significant doses of cosmic rays. We have just conducted a new survey of radiation on flights over 5 continents, and using bubble chambers detected an abundance of deep space neutrons. Researchers have long known that cosmic rays penetrate airplanes. Our own 3-year survey of global radiation shows that X-rays and gamma rays at aviation altitudes are typically 50 times stronger than sea level. This new survey focuses on neutrons, a more potent type of radiation from deep space. So what I'm saying, is not to be afraid to get on an airplane. Most definitely not. But be aware that you may experience some physical, mental, spiritual effects. People are starting to take notice. They're taking different combinations of herbs. They're doing things to offset these effects. They have new rules in aviation that, pilots can only fly so many hours a day, as well as service crews. These are in place to protect. And again, beware of all the new things that are happening. And, think about why it could be possibly happening. Because again, when it all comes back, in my opinion, to the veil of Isis is, the wings of Isis are falling, the veil is thinning. And it has so many positives, but so many what we would consider negatives that we can turn into positives if we're aware and we protect ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Or remember that we're not our bodies. Sorry, Allan.
No, I'm just agreeing with you. Just talk.
From spaceweather.com, the Great Solar Storm of March 1940. A new study published in the research journal Space Weather comes to a shocking conclusion about an old solar storm. On March 24, 1940, a sunspot tornado hit the Earth, causing telephone lines to crackle with 800 volts of electricity. If such a superstorm occurred today, some modern power systems might not be able to handle it. Well, of course not. Everything's different now. Our technologies are far more sensitive, which we're finding out. So this is bigger than you think, because we've become dependent on our devices, mm-hmm. on our phones, of course, our internet, our televisions, our phone systems, electricity. Think about these things, because
And not just for entertainment and information, but for infrastructure. If these
exactly.
things suddenly went away, as Ben keeps pointing out, we would be in a new Stone Age immediately.
Heartbeat, in a heartbeat. And he's saying, as one of the slides I just showed you, he's saying he believes that can happen any moment. It can happen, he said, the last time in a couple of months. It can definitely, he thinks something will happen before 2030. And I'm going to show you his timeline as we continue in this particular episode. It's quite interesting. So the Carrington event, we've mentioned this in a few episodes already. Carrington event, 1859. So more than 100 years ago, basically almost 175. It is 175 years ago. They call it an X80 class solar flare. Can you imagine? Hit the Earth. Now, this is the Wisconsin Technology Council said on the morning of September 1st, 1859, amateur astronomer Richard Carrington ascended to the private observatory attached to his country estate outside of London. After cranking open the dome's shutter to reveal the clear blue sky, he pointed his brass telescope toward the sun and began to sketch a cluster of enormous dark spots that freckled its surface. Suddenly, Carrington spotted what he described as two patches of intensely bright and white light erupting from the sunspots. 5 minutes later, the fireballs vanished, but within hours, their impact would be felt across the globe.
Wow, he actually saw it through a telescope.
He did. That's why they call it Carrington event. That night, telegraph communications around the world began to fail. There were reports of sparks showering from telegraph machines, shocking operators, and setting papers ablaze. All over the planet, colorful auroras illuminated the nighttime skies, glowing so brightly that birds began to chirp and laborers started their daily chores, believing the sun had begun rising. Some thought the end of the world was at hand, but Carrington's naked eyes had spotted the true cause for the bizarre happenings. A massive solar flare with the energy of 10 billion atomic bombs basically hit the Earth. The flare spewed electrified gas and subatomic particles toward Earth, and the resulting geomagnetic storm, dubbed the Carrington event, was the largest on record to have struck the planet. On record. Now they're finding it's also seemingly a cyclical event. And it happens, I don't know the exact time, so I don't want to say it, but it's within a couple hundred years. So we're there.
Well, now the sun ejects material out all the time. It's just not pointed at the Earth.
We've had several Carrington event type flares happen within the last couple of years. I've been tracking them. As you just pointed out, Allan, they're almost always going in another direction. So we dodged several bullets. So you're absolutely right. Now, they haven't been tracking all those events for a long period of time, so we can only go by what, our instruments were able to determine within, I don't know exactly how many years. But yes, we're starting to see these events happen. And every time it happens, somebody says, oh gosh, we dodged another bullet. That's how close we are to something like this happening. It's really incredible.
Well, how much worse is it going to be when we don't have a magnetic field protecting the planet from it?
Well, that's what I'm talking about. You have this big debate going on whether, the last destruction or, global catastrophic event, however you would imagine that to be, was caused by super flares or solar flares or micronova, and you have the team that believes it was caused by comets. And I like to point out that when we no longer have a magnetic field, we are vulnerable to both.
Right.
So, of course, we had more comets hitting the Earth. And the Australian original people actually have kept track of this through their system of remembering through millions and some would say billions of years, but they've been tracking it. And the events where we get hit by comets in, lots of them are cyclical. And so I would think almost assuredly it's hand in hand with when we're really devastated by Sekhmet.
That would make sense.
It just makes sense. And I like when we're all right? But so continuing with the Wisconsin Technology Council, they say newspapers from France to Australia featured glowing descriptions of brilliant auroras that had turned night into day. One eyewitness account from a woman on Sullivan's Island in South Carolina ran in the Charleston Mercury. The eastern sky appeared of a blood red color. It seemed brightest exactly in the east, as though the full moon, or rather the sun, were about to rise. It extended almost to the zenith. The whole island was illuminated. The sea reflected the phenomenon, and no one could look at it without thinking of the passage in the Bible which says, "The sea was turned to blood." That's Sekhmet raging. The shells on the beach, reflecting light, resembled coals of fire. The sky was so crimson that many who saw it believed that neighboring locales were on fire. Americans in the South were particularly startled by the northern lights, which migrated so close to the equator that they were seen in Cuba and Jamaica. In Abbeville, South Carolina, masons awoke and began to lay bricks at their job site until they realized the hour and returned to bed. In Bealton, Virginia, larks were stirred from their sleep at 1 a.m. and began to warble. In cities across America, people stood in the streets and gazed up at the heavenly pyrotechniques. In Boston, some even caught up on their reading, taking advantage of the celestial fire to peruse the local newspapers. Digestion by fire. See, it begins to bring everything clear when you start to relate what is written in mythology, in the symbolism, in the legends, in our dogma, and you relate it to events that happen in the stars, and also what's happening, in the forces of nature on Earth. And that's why I believe that mythologies worldwide, they're not writing about gods, they're not writing about aliens, they're writing about the forces of nature. And we mistakenly think they're gods as we define the term God today. And that's not how the ancients understood God. These are the forces of nature at war. And it's described by big, huge wars, battles in the heavens. Think about it. It starts to make sense when you hear with our own terminology how we experience these events. It's incredible. On March 13th, 1989, the entire Canadian province of Quebec was plummeted into a blackout for 12 hours as a surge of power knocked out the electricity network. People were left without heating, and the train network and airport shut down. The solar storm also affected the power grids in the U.S., and a number of satellites tumbled out of control for several hours. This space storm, dubbed the worst in the space age by NASA, was roughly about half the strength of a Carrington event. So again, we've lost a great deal of our magnetic field since even 1989, let alone 1859. We don't have the protection that we once did. And so we're beginning, and we talked about in the last episode, we're starting to see even the auroras in the southern states. Just this week, there was another one that hit, and they were seeing them all the way down in, did they say Missouri, and, southern states, basically. So these are anomalies. They didn't happen until recently that it's happening this often. Many, many incidents in the past year. We do need to take this seriously, in my opinion. And this is here just to give you an idea of, here's a big solar, a plasma emission from the sun, and that's the size of the Earth next to it. Wow. And that's coming at us. Now, it's probably not in proportion to where we are, of course.
Right, the Earth wouldn't be that close, but
But if it were that close, that's the difference in size. Incredible. So, the magnetosphere plays a major role in protecting people. We've been talking about it. It shields and deflects damaging high-energy cosmic ray radiation, which is created in star explosions and moves constantly through the universe. The magnetosphere also interacts with solar wind, which is a flow of magnetized gas sent out from the sun. If you look at this flow, it's so beautiful. It's all is torus. Everything is atom. This is all relating to our journey of perception. The magnetosphere and ionosphere's interaction with magnetized solar wind creates what scientists call space weather. Usually the solar wind is mild and there's little to no space weather. However, there are times when the sun sheds large magnetized clouds of gas called coronal mass ejections into space. If these coronal mass ejections make it to Earth, their interaction with the magnetosphere can generate geomagnetic storms. These storms can create auroras, which can happen when a stream of energized particles hits the atmosphere and lights up. That's what I was just talking about. During space weather events, there's more hazardous radiation near the Earth. This radiation can potentially harm satellites and astronauts. Space weather can also damage large conducting systems, such as major pipelines and power grids, by overloading currents in these systems. They can also disrupt satellite communication and GPS operation. We can't even rely on satellite phones. Obviously, you think about what Elon Musk has done with all his satellites, and they're talking today about their viability with some of these solar flare hits. Things are really going to start to heat up. Things are going to get dicey, as they say. So what happens to us as this field weakens? Obviously, radiation hazards. The magnetic field and electric currents in and around the Earth generate complex forces that have immeasurable impact on everyday life. The field can be thought of as a huge bubble protecting us from cosmic radiation and charged particles that bombard the Earth and solar winds. Again, I'm just repeating and showing you so you fully understand what's happening. You can see all this radiation coming at us. And the shield is currently protecting us from the bulk of it. A little bit hits us, but now a lot more is hitting us. What does that mean? Well, a weak or reversed field could disorient species that use magnetism to navigate, such as bees, salmon, pigeons, and there are no conclusions yet as to the outcome. And I would go on to say, and us. We are made up of water, and water is magnetic, electromagnetic. We are electromagnetic beings. We are being affected by this, and don't think we're not. And you can see how the birds here are disoriented. Well, this is what's happening here on Earth. I'm hearing more and more people saying they're in a brain fog, or they're experiencing, they just can't seem to ground themselves anymore. And just think about that. Think about how you're feeling differently, than you might have felt 10 years ago, 5 years ago. From Ben Davidson again, he says, we need to be aware of cardiac impact, DNA mutations. Is this the true star seeding that everyone talks about? CNS effects, psychological influence, autoimmune spike. We've heard all these things changing on the planet. Even the recent, event of the pandemic is this radiation? Did it somehow impact what was happening with the pandemic? Cardiac. It also is respiratory impact. The DNA mutations. I love this. that in and of itself could be responsible for rising consciousness.
Mm.
Is this really, is this initiating the Great Awakening? Again, if the field is thinning because this galactic shield is coming to hit us of this plasma, right? That's hitting us now. It's weakening the field, and now we are being enlightened by galactic radiation. It's basically form, mirroring the formless.
Well, it's an adaptation to a new environment.
Exactly.
Evolution,
Exactly.
if you want to get Darwinian.
And this is what we do. This is exactly what we do, and it doesn't mean that. And again, I don't want to knock the alien theories. I'm not saying other interdimensional consciousness doesn't exist. Of course it does. I'm questioning how it's presented, what it really means. Because I honestly think, it wasn't aliens coming and playing with our DNA. It was something alien to us, which is, this impact from this cosmic field hitting us. It's hitting us now. We're experiencing visions. We're experiencing all these amazing events. And because we don't have the physical our physical senses can't interpret what we're experiencing, so we have to wrap it up in a box and put a tie around it and label it something, and the label is a container, and so we contain it with a certain image that we're familiar with. Maybe it was given to us of what an alien looks like, or if we think it's something else. You see what I'm saying? We can only imagine or put into words or wrap into a box what we're already familiar with. And I'm basically challenging all of us to open our minds to another possibility, and we're beginning to see interdimensional energies that we don't have a framework for understanding. And if we open our minds to that, we'll begin to possibly see it for what it really is. It's the truth of what's happening in the space in between. And we have been only looking at form. Even our science focuses only on form and the physical universe. And now it's time for a reversal of perception. That's a big ask. But now we have to remember that the form is the illusion, and wake up to a whole entirely new, wake up, the awakening, wake up to a new way of perceiving our world. And it changes what we're capable of. It awakens senses that we never, we forgot we had. But they are laying mutant. They're latent within us. And when we awaken them, everything changes.
Right. We are the ones with the superpowers.
We are the ones. And all we need to do is to step into that power, and game over, right? Because we can't be controlled by fear. If we remember, there is no death, and we are not our bodies. So more, this is from Rad Hazards, a radiation hazards report. Radiation impacts on our body's neural circuits. Cosmic radiation could increase cancer risks during long duration missions. We've heard that cancer's on the increase. Damage to the human body extends to the brain, heart, and central nervous system, and sets the stage for degenerative diseases if you think you are your body. And this is another way to cure. We've talked about healing, and to remember that our bodies are conscious. We can have a conscious communication with our bodies. A higher percentage of early onset cataracts have been reported in astronauts. Interesting. The constant rain of radiation in space includes cosmic rays, which, despite the name ray, comprises highly energetic particles arriving from beyond the solar system. These rays are considered the main health hazard for astronauts conducting future exploration missions to the moon, Mars, and beyond. This bad stuff can also play havoc with sensitive spacecraft electronics, corrupting data, damaging circuits, and degrading microchips. There are many different kinds of cosmic rays, and they can have very different effects on spacecraft and their occupants, depending on the types of particles and the particles' energies and the duration of exposure. Today, this is just our astronauts. Tomorrow, this could be us and our technologies. So our microchips, our everything could be, beginning, everything as we know it will begin to change. It's the digestion of form. And we need to be prepared for that. If our computers don't work, then maybe we need to remember that we are computers, that we have the ability to just know that we can connect to the neural network of space-time continuum, and we can know what's happening. And I'm seeing this in my own life. It's every time I think I need to talk to someone, or I think I need to connect with someone or write to someone, they write to me before I have a chance. It's just, I feel that we are already connecting. And this could be important as we begin to experience disintegration of everything we thought we knew, to be able to communicate with each other, even if we're, across oceans, on different continents, in different states, in different towns. If the network goes down, don't forget the network that you can tune into. And maintain the health of your endocrine system. And of course, the endocrine system are these chakras, the life force energies within the body. And this is from Alice Bailey from Esoteric Astrology. And she says, within the human etheric body, there are to be found 7 major force centers, which are in the nature of distributing agencies and electrical batteries, providing dynamic force and qualitative energy to the man. They produce definite effects upon his outer physical manifestation. So this is going to change everything within. And it's not only Alice Bailey, but it's Manly P. Hall. So many, Rudolf Steiner, they're telling us to maintain our chakras, our endocrine system. Even the ancients of Egypt, this is actually, the endocrine system was what Egypt focused on for healing. Your life force centers, if they're healthy, your body will be healthy. And they are what generate your Taurus fields, your magnetic fields, your wings of Isis. So keeping them healthy is what will keep you healthy. And a healthy attitude, a healthy mind, staying in balance, transmuting your polarity, and be aware of balancing your emotions, energy and motion, will be a huge help in maintaining your own health, physical, mental, and spiritual. I showed you this before, but it shows you with the weighing of the heart, and the feather, which represent obviously the heart and the mind, the 2 hemispheres of the brain is essential. This weighing of the heart against the feather happens when we move from the physical into the non-physical realms. And the idea is to be sure that your heart weighs less than the feather. And it really speaks to being lighthearted, to not carry all those old tapes, those old feelings with us, to let go, forgive, forget, move on, stay in the now, be clear. And in the center, there is Thoth as the baboon, wisdom from within, and Anubis, the path opener. And, Anubis is holding the heart and emerging between the heart, and the baboon is the chakras, right? The 7 chakras, the Kundalini, however you want to describe it. It's this maintaining your body, keeping the balance. There's Ma'ati, she represents cosmic balance. Ma'ati is the dual images of Ma'at. I know I make it sound easy, but I think it's easier than we think it is. We let ourselves go. We're even driven to feel emotional. We're driven to, once we get started, we're on a roll, we say, and we just, the passion takes hold of us. And, we just get angrier and angrier, or, it just to pull it in, to be aware of what we're doing, and rein it in and stay in balance. It's just, a memory. Here is that SECOM staff, the power staff, the and a solar, a solar emission, this plasma outburst, and is that representing, is one representing the other? The lotus is the sun, and this staff was considered a staff of great power, and maybe that power is exactly what we need, even though we've been afraid of it. And I bring it back in again. So important. Sekhmet is the great mother. If you've ever come to Egypt and gone to Karnak and stood in front of this incredible sculpture crafted by those with, a higher awareness to appear real, she embodies the archetypal energy of the healing aspect of the mother, the nurturing, and the incredible ability, to love no matter what, is the most powerful, the protective love of the mother, the most powerful force on the planet. She represents this moment in time, and she is loving and beautiful, and this is how we heal. We put an end to the patterns, the chaos that no longer serves us. So this is a paper by Durham University, Dr. Simone Scaringhi, I'm trying, the Center for Extragalactic Astronomy from Durham University. He said, we have discovered and identified for the first time what we are calling a micronova. The phenomenon challenges our understanding of how thermonuclear explosions in stars occur. We thought we knew this, but the discovery proposes a totally new way to achieve them. It just goes to show how dynamic the universe is. These events may actually be quite common, but because they are so fast, they are different to catch in action. Ben Davidson's been talking about these events for years. And again, when I was studying the symbolism, the mythology here in Egypt, long before I ever heard about Ben Davidson or looked to astrophysics, I saw these things. I saw even the timeline is here in the symbolism within the temples, and the legends, and on the papyrus. They speak about these events, as I've tried to portray in all these episodes coming up to this one. And then I find Ben, and it's like, oh my gosh, I really was onto something. And that sounds very egotistical. I always come back down to earth when I realize I wasn't the first one to see these things. But it's there, is what I'm trying to tell you. I've had, I've had 15 years to truly look and study and research this, with a passion. That drove me since I was born, basically. Since I was young, I had this passion. I needed to know, and I had dreams about these events, and I didn't understand them. And I think this is why I began to look and ask the questions, and the answers would come. And so it all resonates with me. It may not resonate with you, but it's happening. And what we're pointing out here is this micronova could be the event, and it could literally be a cyclical event that happens around every 12,000 years, give or take, depending on where we're at in the galaxy, due to the breadth of this field of energy from the center of the galaxy, this force field that breathes out and breathes back again and hits our solar system every 12,000 years, spurring accelerated solar activity, super flares, a decreasing magnetic field, the veil of Isis, And suddenly we have a micronova that changes everything. A great light, a serpent emerging from the sun. You know, it's in mythologies worldwide that suddenly changes everything. And we have an end and a new beginning. From Ben, the disaster unfolding. Starts out with changes on planets, stars, and the sun. Started in 1859 and still happening today. The solar kill shot. This is technological. It started happening in the 2020s and he believes will happen in the 2030s. Now, what he's talking about, it's starting. Things are accelerating. He's expecting our first super flare to hit before 2030 or in the early 2030s. Weather, animals, the solar, red and black. He's talking about the changing of the sun. He's saying some of these bigger events will start happening in the 2030s. Solar micronova event, 2030s, 2040s. He's just giving you his timeline. Other people have something different, but almost everyone I've been looking at, and that's from researchers like me looking at ancient mythologies and symbolism and legend and dogma, to astrophysicists. I'm looking at both, and they're all giving dates around the 2030s, 2040s. Shell impact, arc discharge within hours. That can happen at no warning, basically. You have a few hours is not enough warning. Whole planet electrical insult within minutes. Earth turns over, impactors, cold, begins immediately and lasts for days or weeks. This is his timeline when things start to really happen. This gives you an idea of what of several people have projected. And this comes from Dr. Amira Val Baker. I met her with Nassim Haramein. She's in the Resonance Science Foundation as a research scientist. And she says when a flip has occurred in the past, it has been associated with a temporary weakening of the field, which would remove the capabilities of Earth's protective shield, exposing us to increased levels of radiation. I'm just showing you what other people are saying. And it's, as I've said, what we've been talking about from the beginning. There's Osiris emerging from the, into his resurrection. He's basically emerging from the fallen wings of Isis. This is our great resurrection, the great awakening. So I'm not trying to, have everybody afraid. We are going to see these events and we will be challenged by agendas that cause fear. But should we really be afraid is what I'm putting forward. Be aware the events are happening. Let's walk through them a little differently.
And we are suggesting that there are people on this planet, people in charge of us and governments and militaries and the rest, who know very well that this is happening.
Well, that's the other side of the story, isn't it?
They're keeping it from the public.
Of course. Of course. But of course, a lot of what's happening, as Allan's pointing out, today is happening because they know. Of course they know. And they put out, there are reports, and I don't know if it's in this episode or the next, but there are reports that they've actually started to reveal again that they have had on file for many years. Of course they know. And some of the choices they're making, some of the things we're being told, not necessarily, just think twice. Maybe it's related to this. Agreed?
Agreed.
Sorry, I kind of jumped in.
No, but it's a really heavy thought. Like, I don't even know how to...
where to begin. Where to begin? Yeah, and I think maybe we'll touch on that in the Hanuti episode.
Well, it always reminds me. There's that movie from the '90s, Deep Impact. Do you remember?
I do.
About the comet or asteroid that's going to hit, and at the beginning of the movie, it's clear that the authorities know exactly what's going on, and all the preparations have been made, and there's a certain time when they believe that the time is right to tell the public when all of these preparations have been made.
Well, that's exactly right. And there's been many movies after that one. Many. There's even been the one, the latest one, which was on Netflix. I can't remember the name of it, but it was done with humor about that very thing.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, but are they really going to tell us?
That's the thing,
Or
and
are
then
they
I,
just going to let it happen and let the chips fall where they may?
well, they're telling us and they're not telling us. They're telling us different things, but, it's coming out in the film. And as I keep mentioning, the assistant prime minister of the UK recently told everyone in the UK to start storing food and items, be prepared for an event. In
Oh,
America,
right. Just like in America, when the eclipse a couple of weeks ago, everybody was saying, state of emergency, stock up, for prepare for
exactly,
weeks of, and then nothing
exactly.
happened, of course. But
And of course, this latest movie by Netflix, Leave the World Behind, which I'll mention in an upcoming slide, um, these are all here for a reason. It's not just for our viewing entertainment. So I just put it out there. In fact, Leave the World Behind, Alan came to see me a couple months ago, and I said, you have to watch this movie. And it's basically, it is immersed, it's just, it has so much symbolism in it. It just blew me away.
right, the
And you,
people who wrote and produced it can't not know what's going on.
oh my gosh, no. And strangely enough, it does point to a solar event, even though they never say that. You have to look and read between the lines. So fascinating things happening. So yeah, this is happening now. The most dramatic changes occur when the poles reverse is a very large decrease of the total field intensity. It is caused by patches of iron atoms in our liquid outer core getting reverse aligned as if they were small magnets oriented in the opposite direction to others
Hmm.
around them.
Hmm.
If reversed ions, expand to the stage, they outpower the others. The Earth's overall magnetic field flips. This comes from Jean-Pierre Vallée, who conducts research on geomagnetic reversals.
Well, and when the Earth's magnetic field flips, our body's magnetic fields are going to flip as well.
Of course, everything happens this way. We know this with the Schumann resonance. We are, as inhabitants on the Earth, everything happens that happens to the Earth will happen, electromagnetically to us. There has to be a reaction to what's happening anywhere in the universe. And that's what I'm saying. We can't just look at what's happening on the Earth when we look at our future. We have to think about what's happening with the sun, the solar system, the galaxy, and even the universe. We don't exist alone. We're not
Well,
isolated.
this is how we know that man-made global warming is total bullshit because it's happening on all of the planets in the solar system.
Well, yeah, there's so many things happening, like, storm, hurricane reversals on, I think, was that Jupiter? You have to really look closely, and I don't want to say what may not be true, but these things are happening. Really fascinating, huge changes are happening on all the planets in the solar system, all related to what's happening with the sun. And we need to be aware. It's again, we are all connected. We are all waveform. We are all electromagnetic. We are all connected to everything happening in basically anywhere in the universe, but especially in our vicinity,
Mhm.
um, and on many different levels. This is the latest from Berkeley scientist. Reversal can happen within 80 years. Okay, they a little overestimation there, maybe right, but within 80 years, we're getting closer to the truth. And I'm not saying they're not right. Maybe it's 100 years. But again, be aware of what many are coming to and saying. It could be, next month, and it could be 20 years, it could be 80 years, it could be 5 years, but it's definitely, we are moving this direction and it's going to happen. If not, in our lifetimes or your children's, it will be their children, in my opinion. But the truth is, according to many, as I said, it could happen much more quickly. Pole shift. I mean, everybody's been seeing this, but again, we see we see these reports there, we tend to compartmentalize everything, and we're not connecting to all the things that are happening now. Here's your weakening magnetic field. It was 100% in 1859, and it was that way for thousands of years. And within the last 160 years, look what happened. We're down at least 30%, if not more. Wow. Something's happening, and it's going to affect us. Please let that seep in, because you can experience this in many different ways, and it really is this is the moment. We chose to be here now to experience this. Let's experience it together in the most positive way.
Yeah, don't put your head in the sand.
Well, yeah, I almost said that 2 seconds ago. You're reading my mind again, Alan. Exactly. We can choose to do that. And if that's the way you need to deal with it, that's fine. But be aware, because eventually you are going to want to pull your head out of the sand. If not now, I believe you will. And it's always a personal choice, but the sun will have another super flare. The global grids will fail, and we will have only a few hours from the flare to the end of the modern world. This from Ben. And I feel that myself. I feel it in my bones. I didn't think I would be here for this. I felt it years ago. As I said, I had childhood dreams, and I'm shocked that I'm so close to this now. And I guess it sort of makes sense, but I feel it. I feel it stronger now than ever. The things that are beginning to happen more readily to be aware about: internet issues, flight issues. It's happening. Technology, satellites, seismic activity, electrical fires. I see in times where there's super sun activity, when everything's highly charged, there are more fires around Cairo. I see more news of fires in other places. Because our news is semi-isolated, we don't get a lot of international news, what's happening in Italy today. But if you were to see how everyone seems to be experiencing the same events, then we'd really see these patterns more starkly. Transformers, global blackout, all these things are possible with what's happening, and with our health. It's going to affect our bodies, our minds. That's a biggie. Spirit. And it's happening, again, keep this in mind, to all species. Mm-hmm. Fish. I was just talking to Allan about, I saw reports off the coast of Florida that they have what's happening. They're calling them spinners, and certain species of fish are suddenly spinning. They're swimming in circles until they die. That sounds insane, right? Is this related to what's happening? We see more. I just also saw a report today off the coast of Australia, I think, 24, 34, a huge group of whales swam right up to the coast and died. They navigate with magnetics, and weird, strange things are happening. Be aware, because if we watch the wildlife, I saw anomalies happening when I go to the States and I see the birds aren't flying south when they're supposed to. All of these things, and I think, what's happening? I grew up out in the country, and I watched the wildlife, and they're pretty stuck in their ways. They just seem to do a lot of the same things over and over and over again. When they start acting in different ways, flying in different patterns, showing up where they never show up, that's anomalous, that's odd. Um, yeah, I go to the beach, the Red Sea, and notice there's no birds. I used to love going to the beach just to hear the seabirds. I looked it up, and the amount of birds, seabirds across the entire planet have decreased by a phenomenal amount. I don't know where it is today. I looked it up in 2020, and I think it was like more than 30%. It was a huge number. So yeah, when I see weird things, I actually go and look it up and see what's happening everywhere else. That's the way sadly, the way my mind works. But so yeah, increased radiation impacts ozone, impacts climate, impacts cells in your body. Cells are intelligent, impacts how we view and perceive the world, impacts our health. Magnetic changes, impacts navigation, impacts cells. Navigation. If animals are showing up where they don't belong, that's an anomaly. Changes. Health issues, heart rate variation, blood pressure changes, stroke, infarction risk, autoimmune spikes, migraines, seizures, psychological issues, cognitive diminution, emotional instability. Are you noticing this with any of your friends or family? What can we do to improve the health of our body, minds, and spirits now so we walk through this more gently? Devolution, signs of the sickness, major changes in thinking, irresistible temptation, devolution behavior, fear and hopelessness. When you start to feel any of these things, give yourself a break. Find ways to transmute those emotions. Look for the good, appreciation for what's beautiful. And remember, these are positive changes coming. And if we remember we're not our bodies, always remember that. We are not our bodies. We are so much more. Some people are more at risk. If you have unhealed traumas or know someone that does, drug or alcohol abuse, negative influences, poor diet, attitude, you are more at risk. It's important to know this. Solar-driven geomagnetic disturbances impact homicide rates in Europe and the USA. There's a report, a white paper by the Journal of Forensic Psychology. It's happening now. Have you noticed changes in yours or your friends' and family's behavior? Have you noticed any changes in the behavior and temperament of your pets? My pets go crazy when there's a solar outburst. They start literally climbing the curtains. They run around. They drive me insane. Your surrounding wildlife. We were just talking about the fish and the whales and the birds and so many things. Be aware. Extremely low frequency or ELF exposure, like those from magnetic sphere reverberation and during geomagnetic storms, has been shown to cause DNA damage. Well, maybe it's not so much damage as change, but okay, DNA damage can cause inflammation, disrupt cellular reproductive processes. How many movies talk about women that can no longer give birth? Reduce immune function, slow wound healing, and influence behavioral and psychological activity. Similar correlations have been suggested for ultra-low frequency. Geomagnetic induction of anxiety, restlessness, and abnormal behavior was shown in laboratory animals to overpower sedative drugs. So many different things. How do we stop the chaos? Cut the head off the pattern for a moment's silence. This is Ra as the cat. He says, I am the cat beside whom the Ishid tree was split in Heliopolis on that night when the enemies of the Lord of all were destroyed. What is that? The male cat is Ra himself, called Mew, meow. When Sa Wisdom said of him, that is how Mu he is by what he has done. And so his name is Mu, came to be. Ra, with his fierce rays, the eye which is Sekhmet, cuts the head off the patterns for a moment of silence and then renewal, a new sun. It's the resurrection. This is from Manly P. Hall. And you see that wonderful image on the far right where the lion pulls us out of our sarcophagus. Sarcophagus is a word that goes back to a root word for egg. Basically, it's, from the womb to the tomb to the womb, and we come out of our tomb at the resurrection time. The tomb is the body. We begin to realize we are no longer our body. Albert Pike reproduced the hieroglyphic picture that was copied from an Egyptian monument in one of his books. That's in the right-hand image, and it shows that the lion is pulling Osiris up for his resurrection, and the lion representing Leo, the currency, so many different things. And Manly Pial says the visible connection between the constellation Leo and the return of the sun to his place of power and glory at the summit of the royal arc of heaven this is Leo, was the principal reason why that constellation was held in such high esteem and reverence by the ancients. The astrologers distinguished Leo as the sole house of the sun and taught the world that the world was created when the sun was in that sign. When the Aquarian age is thoroughly established, which we are in now, folks, the sun will be in Leo if you're looking down. South is up. The southern hemisphere, when we see Aquarius rising on the horizon in the northern hemisphere, those living in the southern hemisphere see Leo rising. All we need is a magnetic reversal. Then indeed will the secret religions of the worlds include once more the raising to initiation by the grip of the lion's paw. The moment we leave our tombs, back to the womb of cosmic consciousness. The cycle ends and begins at Leo. It's the digestion of the physical. These are the famous images of the green lion eating the sun. The end of the old sun, beginning of the new sun. It represents a midpoint in an alchemical and spiritual transformation. A moment of silence. I showed these images before. It never hurts to see it again. We see Osiris literally laying flat on his back. He has to turn over and rise. He rolls over to his stomach and then he rises at the bottom. You can see he's on the sled for a moment of silence before he is reborn. Your face shall awaken after darkness has been dispelled. I shall rejuvenate your body in order that your strength might become great. We walk back into our power. We walk into our power. It's thought that quote comes from Shu and Tefnut, but there's no proof. Head over heels, the famous yoga position under Nut. The earth turns over. Journey of perception. And there's the advertisement for Netflix's Leave the World Behind. And the image of this great, beautiful deer is known in mythology to be a message of hope, with this great spread of antlers. And there's so many different stories and legends worldwide about this. So the final message, they do give us hope. And I encourage people to see it, if you're called to see it. And just look at the symbolism within it. Allan and I talk about this all the time, how, so many movies contain so much symbolism and knowledge about events that are to occur. And again, observe them, don't absorb them, their messages, because usually the message can, often it's quite opposite from what's really happening. But the messages within, if you discern them with all the knowledge that you accrue, you begin to see that the patterns tell the story, not the story. If that makes any sense. This is from Amira Rayad. She's an Egyptologist, and she says the winged jet pillar from the temple of Ramses II at Abydos, the scene shows Ramses anointing the figure of the god Osiris with his little finger. Allan and I pointed this out in another expression. The text between Osiris and the jet pillar said, "I give to you all health." The mystery in this unique scene is that the jet pillar that consists of the power of Osiris as secret of life, power of regeneration, which is always alive, is now active. We can see that through the cobra on the crown, an Isis wings symbol of protection. Ramses II actually is trying to awake this image, his soul after being unified with Osiris himself. The scene is a scene of resurrection, not for Osiris, but for Ramses. Osiris. He simply guarantees his awakening, his resurrection. And of course, when you look at another image at Abydos, Osiris is flat on his back, and you see that Isis has basically, he's basically dead, flat on his back, and she's basically flown. She turns into the kite bird, excuse me, flies all up and down the Nile, finding all of his dismembered parts that were cut by Set, and she unifies them to magically create the body of Osiris, except for his phallus, which gets eaten by fish in the Nile. But she magically creates a new one, and she regenerates him by flapping her wings, right? And she basically feeds him the life force again. And again, the wings are the magnetic field. So this is that from that moment of silence, the 3 days of darkness, the magnetic field comes back. That's the divine feminine. And it spins us back into life again. So we go from being upside down and backwards to being right side up and forward. But that's a reversal. That's and this is how it's presented. And I've shown you these before, but it never hurts to see it again when you start to connect all the dots. Imagination is the real and external world of which this vegetable universe is but a faint shadow, from William Blake. Blake refers to the space in between the forms where the ancients knew truth lies. We are the shadow of what's real, consciousness itself.
Like Plato's cave.
Exactly. That's why all of these episodes all come together to create this amazing story of us, and how it actually happens when we think we're physical, but when we remember we're not. It's just a journey of perception. And here's again the journey of the resurrection of Osiris, and you can see Horus is restoring the gift of life to his father, and they're one and the same. Horus is the ascended Osiris, but he's assisting him here because it's a metaphor for what's happening to us. And that after the restoration of this gift of life, we become the Akh, the light body. Interesting. This from Jimmy Dunn. It's great. The image is beautiful. You can see the image is basically of the king feeding a bread cake in the form of a pyramid to Min, who is seeding, who basically seeds the new creation. And Jimmy Dunn says, at the beginning of the harvest season, Min's statue was carried through the fields at a festival known as the Departure of Min. Min blessed the harvest, that's the resurrection, right? And the people held games in his honor, most of which involved the menfolk climbing a huge pole, which had a connection with fertility, not unlike the maypole. course, it's exactly like the maypole. It is thought that this related to the construction of a huge festival pavilion where festivities were held. That maypole happens all over the world in different, this raising of the pole, the jed, happens all over the world. Min was closely associated with fertility and agriculture. And so with Osiris, in depictions of one of Min's festivals, the pharaoh hoes and waters the ground while Min watches. In another, the pharaoh ceremoniously reaps the grain. However, Min was not just a fertility god, but a patron of male sexuality who could help men to father children. When the pharaoh successfully fathered an heir, he was identified with the god, and a virginal girl was sometimes called an unplowed field. So this idea of the virgin, even parthenogenesis, comes from this metaphoric story of how everything comes to be with electromagnetism, basically, scalar energy, electromagnetism in all its different forms. As he represented male fertility, it is not surprising that it was Min who presided over the Hebset festival, in which the pharaoh ran a course carrying the ritual objects to rejuvenate him and to prove his virility. The Hebset was basically the king's literal resurrection rituals, when his king became old and tired, just like the sun, just like the earth, just like every waveform in nature. This is the pattern of life, and it can't be any other way. We showed you this image before. It comes from one of the golden boxes of Tutankhamun, and you can see, there's Osiris on his stomach receiving the rays of the sun. I like to show that they show that the image of the feet upside down,
right?
The movement of the sun going one direction and then going right side up, and seeding, of course, the energy lines of the earth as the lionesses. It's just, there's so many ways to read this, and I'm not going to do that now, but I'm showing you our relationship to the sun and how it seeds us and feeds us and changes our perception, and physical, mental, and spiritual perceptions on earth. So we'll end up with, what can we do now? When you start to realize that you are your own source of power and love, that is what your energy shifts. That is when your energy shifts inwards. Instead of your energy grasping outwards, looking for confirmation, validation, your awareness remains centered within you, and suddenly you have energy. You feel empowered by something deeper within you. You feel in control even in the midst of chaos. You are your own source of power. Own it. This is so important. Open your chest. Show your heart. Be who you are. Yakini, yakini. You are powerful. And you are not your body. A call to go within and reconnect with self and all that is. Develop compassion, appreciation, strive for harmony, honor nature, walk in peace amongst the chaos. And this from Rudolf Steiner: the downfall of our present epoch will be caused by a lack of morality. And this is in the mythologies and legends worldwide as well. The sun is upset that we're out of Ma'at. We're not revering the forces of nature. The Lemurian epic was destroyed by fire. Where we go again. The Atlantean by water, and our epic and its civilization will be destroyed by the war of all against all, by evil. Human beings will destroy each other in mutual strife. Doesn't have to be this way. And the terrible thing, more desperately tragic than other catastrophes, will be that the blame will lie with human beings themselves. A tiny handful of men will make good and thus ensure their survival in the sixth epoch of civilization. This tiny handful will have attained selflessness. The others will develop every imaginable skill and subtlety in the manipulation and use of the physical forces of nature, but without the essential degree of selflessness. In the seventh epoch of civilization, this war of all against all will break out in the most terrible form. Great and mighty forces will be let loose by the discoveries, turning the whole Earth globe into a kind of self-functioning live electric mass. In a way that cannot be discussed, the tiny handful will be protected and preserved. Interesting take. I'm not sure I totally agree with what's being said. But I've heard this before, that there's all these different epics, and that the end is initiated in different ways and the new beginning is different. But it all comes down to how we walk through it. And we can change the patterns. We can cut the head off the snake anytime we want. And basically, this is why Allan and I are doing these podcasts, because we really do believe in the power of conscious awareness and the ability to co-create our reality. Beautiful image of the old Wilton Reservoir. Terence McKenna, we all know Terence. He says, nature loves courage. You make the commitment and nature will respond to that commitment by removing impossible obstacles. Dream the impossible dream and the world will not grind you under. It will lift you up. This is the trick. This is what all these teachers and philosophers who really counted, who really touched the alchemical gold, this is what they understood. This is the shamanic dance in the waterfall. This is how magic is done. That's what we're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can do this. Light the fire within. On the far left is an image of Nefertum. When Sekhmet wakes up after her 3 days of stillness, of silence, she lays her eyes upon Ptah, who is the projection into form, the mound rising from the receding waters, from primordial waters of pure consciousness, the moment of silence. She sees him and falls madly in love. And together they give birth to Nefertum. And Nefer is the harmony, Tum is the atom. It's the harmony of the atom. It's our years, our new life, our many years of peace on earth. That's the rise into an entirely new state of being. So you can see Nefertum as the lion here. He's a masculine lion, and he has the lotus crown, in this case growing out of another hawk, showing he is an ascended sun. And he has consciousness from within, heart-based consciousness, right brain consciousness. And this again from Story Waters, the light, when I say light the fire within, you are eternal consciousness in human form. Your spirit is an infinite state of consciousness that knows it is far more than the individuated, temporary, mortal self you are currently experiencing. Through its wider focus, perceptual aperture, your spirit knows it's connected to everything in existence. Spiritual awakening, enlightenment, is to become aware of the wider state of consciousness known as your spirit, higher self, soul, or wider self. To become conscious of your spirit is to taste its infinite nature. To be fully conscious of your spirit is to be your spirit. This is to open yourself beyond your individuality to connect into the collective ocean of consciousness, the wider reality, from which we all emerge. Opening yourself to these unfiltered experiences will change you more than years of studying spiritual knowledge. To taste your infinite nature is to light a fire within that reflects a desire for more, a passion for the exploration of consciousness. See, it's easier than you thought. And that's all for today.
Wow.
It's a lot. It's the tip of the iceberg, but it is the awakening. We all talk about it. There's been movies and movements, and even Hakim, before he passed, said we were moving into the age of Kepler, the new beginning, the rising, when we earn our wings. And nobody said it would be easy. We've seen how the butterfly emerges from its cocoon. It's no different. It's a whole new world. There's a whole world out there that we haven't been able to experience because of our limited senses. And yes, we're going to have to, crack open the cocoon, the eggshell that we've been in, basically, womb, tomb, womb. It's always the same. We move from one experience to another. And these pivotal moments are life changing, obviously. And I think it's exciting. And how we embrace it is going to make all the difference in the world.
It's definitely exciting, and we have our work cut out for us to prepare for this, for sure.
Definitely. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you very much, Patricia. You have some tours coming up. People can find information on our website, horusrising.com, and we will be back very soon with another episode. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye.